In the summer of 1945, the United States Army manufactured 370,000 Purple Hearts. Not over the course of the war, in a single production run for a single operation against a single enemy. One medal for every American soldier expected to come home from that operation wounded, or not come home at all. The stockpile sat in government warehouses, waiting. Those Purple Hearts were still being awarded to American soldiers wounded in Korea, and Vietnam, and the Gulf War, and Iraq, and Afghanistan. 75 years of American warfare, and the supply made for one invasion of one archipelago in 1945 had still not been exhausted. What operation required 370,000 casualty medals? What did the United States military believe was coming, and why didn't it? The answer is not a single battle. It is a decision, one of the most consequential in the history of warfare. And to understand why America made it, you have to understand what they believed they were choosing between. By the summer of 1945, Japan is militarily ruined. Its navy barely exists. Its best pilots are dead. Its armies are scattered and isolated across an empire that has already collapsed. The American naval blockade has stopped most shipping, creating crippling shortages of food and oil. American bombing raids have leveled most major Japanese cities. 200,000 dead from conventional bombing, 473,000 more wounded. A single firebombing attack on Tokyo in March kills more than 80,000 people in one night. And still, Japan fights on. Its government does not negotiate. Its military does not break. Its people do not revolt. And the paradox is plain. A nation on the edge of ruin, choosing ruin over surrender. For American military planners staring at their maps in Washington, the question is not whether Japan is losing. The question is what it will take to make them stop. The Pacific War has established, island by island, a logic of escalating cost. At Iwo Jima, 6,800 Americans dead, 19,000 wounded, an island less than 8 square miles. At Okinawa, 350 miles south of Japan's home islands, 12,500 Americans killed, 49,000 more wounded. The casualty rate, 35%. 1 in 3 Americans who set foot on that island comes off it as a casualty. Japan is the only destination left. On the afternoon of June 18, 1945, Harry Truman convenes a meeting in the White House Cabinet Room. Maps of Kyushu are pinned to the walls. The Joint Chiefs are present. Kobe's Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, is present. The afternoon light falls through tall windows onto men who understand exactly what they are about to decide. At stake is whether to press forward with the most ambitious amphibious operation in history or to find some other way to end a war that is grinding toward its 4th year. The operation has a name, Operation Downfall. 2 phases. Phase 1, Operation Olympic, targets the southern third of Kyushu, Japan's southernmost main island, with November 1st, 1945, set as X-Day. Phase 2, Operation Coronet, is the assault on the Kanto Plain near Tokyo, planned for the spring of 1946. If executed, downfall will be larger than Normandy. It will require 1.7 million American troops, 42 aircraft carriers, 24 battleships, 400 destroyers. Truman is afraid it will look like, in his own words, to Okinawa from one end of Japan to the other. The casualty estimates presented at that meeting range from 31,000 to well over 200,000 American dead. And those are the conservative figures. A study prepared by physicist William Shockley projects up to 4 million American casualties and 10 million Japanese dead. Herbert Hoover, asked by Truman to prepare post-war planning, estimates up to 1 million Americans killed and wounded. The numbers vary because the uncertainty is genuine. The estimates depend on assumptions about Japanese resistance that are changing faster than the estimates can be updated. Truman approves the planning, He orders the troop transfers from Europe. The door to invasion swings open. What no one in that cabinet room yet fully understands is what is waiting on the other side. Japan has been watching. If its military intelligence has worked through the same geography that American planners have studied and arrived at the same conclusions. The invasion, when it comes, will have to come through Kyushu. The terrain makes any other approach nearly impossible. And so Japan does something the Germans never managed before Normandy. Something that will only become fully clear to American intelligence too late. Japan predicts the exact beaches: Miyazaki, Ariake Bay, the Satsuma Peninsula. The same three locations where American divisions are planned to land. Japan calculates the timing as well. The end of the typhoon season, the first days of November. Their prediction and the American plan align so closely that the documents, laid side by side, are nearly interchangeable. They are not waiting to be surprised. They are waiting to be ready. What the Americans are walking into has a name: Operation Ketsugo. Its logic is not to win. Japan's military leadership has moved beyond the concept of victory. The objective of Ketsugo is to kill enough Americans to break the will of the American public and force a negotiated settlement rather than unconditional surrender. The strategic center of gravity in Japanese planning is not territory. It is American willingness to keep paying. In the spring of 1945, one Japanese army division defends Kyushu. By midsummer, ultra-code-breaking intercepts begin tracking a buildup that alarms every planner who sees the numbers. 6 divisions, then 10. By late summer, American intelligence estimates 680,000 defenders on the island. The actual number, invisible to American planners, is over 900,000. The Japanese are adding divisions faster than the intelligence can record them. The Kamikaze arsenal grows with the same momentum. In May, Army estimates count 3,391 aircraft available for suicide attacks. In June, 4,862. In August, 5,911. And the Navy's estimate, counting all available aircraft including trainers, reaches 10,290. By the time the war ends, Japan possesses 12,700 aircraft in the home islands, roughly half of them configured as kamikazes. At Okinawa, 2,000 kamikazes had been deployed. They sank 20 American vessels and damaged 217 more. At Kyushu, the terrain will allow attack runs at low altitude, shielded from ships' radar by the coastline. And this time, the pilots have new orders: target the transports, not the warships. Not the carriers and the destroyers, the ships carrying the men. One staff study estimates that kamikazes can destroy between a third and a half of the invasion force before it reaches the beaches. Japanese planners project they will sink more than 400 ships. The naval forces waiting offshore are not only aircraft, roughly 100 Koryu midget submarines, 200 smaller Kairyu midget submarines, 1,000 Kaiten man torpedoes, at least 800 Shinyo high-speed suicide boats, and just beneath the surface near the landing beaches, 4,000 Fukuryu, suicide frogmen, each armed with a lunge mine on a long pole, waiting to ram the hulls of Allied landing craft. On land, 28 million civilians have been organized into the Volunteer Fighting Corps. Men from 15 to 60, women from 17 to 40. Many have been trained with bamboo spears, grenades, and improvised explosives. The government has launched a propaganda campaign whose title requires no translation: The Glorious Death of 100 Million. And in captured planning documents, stated with the bluntness of a military directive, all Allied prisoners of war were to be executed upon invasion. Approximately 100,000 men. This is what is waiting. American planners know the situation is bad. They do not yet know how precisely it has been arranged for them. Harry Truman has 4 options, and by the summer of 1945, time is making each one smaller. The first is continued conventional bombing, which is already burning Japan's cities to ash without breaking its leadership. The second is blockade, which is starving the country and may, given months or years, force a surrender, but will also starve millions of Japanese civilians and keep American troops in the Pacific indefinitely. The third is a ground invasion, and the maps are on the walls. The fourth option is a weapon whose existence Truman only learned about 83 days ago. In May, Truman forms the Interim Committee, a group of civilian leaders and scientists empowered to advise him on the atomic bomb. The committee is chaired by Stimson, advised by J. Robert Oppenheimer and the scientific panel. It meets. It deliberates. It hears from the dissenters, a group of scientists led by Leo Szilard at the University of Chicago, who urged that the bomb be demonstrated on a deserted island before an international audience, giving Japan a chance to see the weapon's power without a city burning beneath it. The committee rejects the demonstration for 3 reasons. First, what if the bomb failed to detonate? An American superweapon that misfired would harden Japanese resolve rather than shatter it. Second, there are only 2 bombs. Using one on an empty island expends half the country's entire atomic arsenal on a piece of ocean. Third, and this reason will only become clear in the weeks to come, there is genuine doubt that even a spectacular demonstration would move Japan's military leadership. That doubt will be vindicated, but not in the way anyone hopes. On June 21st, the Interim Committee delivers its recommendation. We can propose no technical demonstration likely to bring an end to the war. We can see no acceptable alternative to direct military use. The bomb, if used, should be used without warning, on a target that combines military significance with the kind of surrounding structures whose destruction will demonstrate the weapon's scale. 4 cities are placed on the target list. Stimson personally removes a 5th, Kyoto. He has visited the ancient capital. He will not see it burned. Hiroshima makes the list. So does Nagasaki. On July 16th, in the desert of New Mexico, the bomb is tested. Truman is at Potsdam when the news reaches him. In his diary, he calls it the most terrible bomb in the history of the world. He writes that it may be the fire destruction prophesied in the Euphrates Valley era after Noah and his fabulous ark. The man who will publicly claim he never lost sleep over this decision puts those words in his private journal and tells no one. He does tell Stalin something. At Potsdam, Truman approaches the Soviet leader and mentions carefully that the United States has a new weapon of unusual destructive force. He is offering a controlled disclosure, a diplomatic signal. Stalin listens. He shows no visible reaction, not because he is unimpressed, but because the information is not new. Soviet intelligence had already penetrated the Manhattan Project. Stalin has known about the bomb for years. The great diplomatic moment of the summer of 1945 is a conversation between 2 men who both know more than they are saying, and only one of them knows that. On July 26th, the Allied leaders issue the Potsdam Declaration, an ultimatum demanding Japan's unconditional surrender, warning of prompt and utter destruction. The declaration does not mention the atomic bomb. Outside the Allied command, and the weapon's existence is classified. The phrase prompt and utter destruction is the warning, but without the word atomic, it is a warning Japan cannot decode. They have no way of knowing what is behind it. Japan's Prime Minister Suzuki responds with a word, mokusatsu. It may mean no comment. It may mean treat with silent contempt. The ambiguity is real. Suzuki may have intended it as a holding position while Japan continued to seek Soviet mediation, not as a formal rejection. What the Americans hear, through the imprecision of translation and the static of war, is refusal. The door closes. On August 6, 1945, in the pre-dawn darkness of Tinian Island, a tropical airstrip 1,500 miles south of Japan. 12 men board a B-29 named the Enola Gay. The bomb is already in the aircraft's belly. The runway stretches into blackness. The plane takes off at 2:45 in the morning and turns north, climbing through the Pacific night. At 8:15 a.m. over Hiroshima, on a clear summer morning with the Otta River Delta spread below in blue and silver, Little Boy is released. In the first minutes, 80,000 dead. The pillar of smoke climbs to 40,000 feet. Tens of thousands more will die in the weeks that follow from radiation and burns. Tokyo receives word of a devastating event in Hiroshima. The Imperial Army declares it will only concede the weapon's nature after an investigation, and the Supreme War Council, the six-man body that holds the legal power to end the war, does not convene. Not that day. Not the next. 3 full days pass after the most destructive single strike in human history before Japan's leadership formally meets to discuss it. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, at one of the 3 military hawks on the council, argues that the United States cannot possibly possess more than a handful of such weapons. He will hold to this position even as the evidence mounts. The scientists who proposed a demonstration on an uninhabited island had assumed that a display of the bomb's power would break Japan's military leadership. The real bomb on a real city with 80,000 dead had produced 3 days of institutional silence and a demand for further investigation. The assumption had its answer. On August 8th, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan. 2 days after Hiroshima, hours before the second bomb. With it goes the last avenue Japan's peace faction had been counting on, Moscow as a diplomatic intermediary. That channel does not close slowly. It is gone overnight. On August 9th, Soviet forces cross into Manchuria. Within hours, a second aircraft reaches Nagasaki. In the first minute after Fat Man detonates, 39,000 people are killed. 25,000 more are wounded. Suzuki, who has just come from a meeting with Hirohito, tells the Supreme Council that morning that it is impossible to continue the war. The council is deadlocked. On one side, General Korechika Anami, General Yoshijiro Umezu, Admiral Soemu Toyoda. On the other, Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, Naval Minister Mitsumasa Yonai, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, 3 against 3. In the Japanese constitutional structure, a cabinet can govern only with unanimous consent. The army can veto any decision simply by having its minister resign, collapsing the government. Anami holds this power, and he intends to use it. Even now, after Hiroshima, or after Nagasaki, after Soviet entry, he argues for the defense of the home islands. He is not a fanatic in any simple sense. He is a man so completely enclosed within the logic of military obligation and institutional honor that no other move is available to him. The system has made his position inevitable. 2 atomic bombs have not unmade it. The deadlock is constitutional. No vote can break it. No argument can break it. There is one person alive who can. Shortly before midnight on August 9th, Prime Minister Suzuki requests something that has never happened in the history of the Supreme War Council, an imperial conference. He asks the emperor to decide. The men gather in the bomb shelter beneath the imperial palace. It is past midnight. They are exhausted, in formal dress, in the underground dim. The argument has been made and remade, and the lines have not moved. Then Suzuki tells Hirohito that consensus is impossible and asks him to speak. Hirohito speaks. He endorses the position of the peace faction, acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration on one condition: the imperial institution must be preserved. His voice in that shelter ends the stalemate that 2 atomic bombs and Soviet entry could not. What follows is the longest night of the war. The surrender announcement is prepared. A recording is made. It is placed in a safe in the Imperial Household Ministry. And through that night, a group of young army officers move through the palace grounds with weapons. They are looking for the recording. They intend to destroy it, to prevent it from being broadcast, to force the war to continue by eliminating the evidence that the emperor has spoken. Others leave the palace with a different purpose, moving through the darkened streets of Tokyo toward the homes of the men who argued for peace. Assassination orders have been issued against members of the Big Six. The coup fails. The assassinations fail. The recording survives. At noon on August 15, 1945, the Japanese people hear the voice of their emperor for the first time. He speaks in archaic court Japanese, formal, distant, a dialect many of his subjects struggle to understand. He explains that Japan has accepted the terms of the Potsdam Declaration. He does not use the word surrender. He refers to a new and most cruel bomb. He gives his reasons: lost faith in the defensive strategy, the devastation of the bombing, and what he calls the domestic situation, the growing fear of internal revolt that no military victory could any longer forestall. His voice ends. The war is over. Except that it is not. Not yet. In China and in the commands across the southern area, Japanese officers declare they will not comply. Between a quarter and a third of all Japanese servicemen are under commanders who initially refuse the emperor's order. It takes Hirohito's personal emissaries traveling physically to those commands before the surrender holds everywhere. The formal ceremony takes place on September 2nd aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on a brilliant morning with the harbor flat and still. MacArthur stands at the microphone, his corncob pipe set aside. The Japanese delegation ascends from a motorboat, climbs the ladder, signs. An American aircraft roar overhead. The war that required 2 atomic bombs and Soviet entry and a midnight imperial intervention and a coup attempt and personal emissaries to overseas commands. That war is over. What followed has not finished being argued about. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded, after exhaustive review of the evidence, that Japan would likely have surrendered before November 1st, 1945, even without the atomic bombs or an invasion. The revisionist school of historians, beginning with Gar Alperovitz in the 1960s, built on this finding, arguing that Japan was already collapsing, that the bombs were unnecessary, that other motives, including the management of post-war Soviet power, shaped the decision. The counter-evidence has to be placed alongside it, since the Supreme War Council was deadlocked after 2 atomic bombs. A coup was attempted the night before the announcement. Overseas commands refused the order. It required the emperor's personal, unprecedented intervention to break a stalemate that the destruction of 2 cities could not. If a war ends this narrowly, this contingently, this close to failing even after the bombs, then the question of whether any gentler shock would have ended it cleanly is not one the evidence resolves. 2 ironies remain in the record. The first, Kyoto survives. Stimson removes it from the target list personally, on the grounds that destroying Japan's ancient cultural capital would generate hostility that could push post-war Japan toward the Soviet Union. One man's attachment to a civilization he visited as a younger man saves a city. And the calculus that governs everything else in this story, for one moment, yields to something else entirely. The second, the condition Japan needed in order to end the war. The preservation of the emperor's position is ultimately granted by the Allies. Hirohito remains. Joseph Grew, who had served as American ambassador to Japan, had brought exactly this proposal to Truman in May of 1945. General MacArthur had agreed that an offer protecting the emperor might have secured surrender months earlier. Herbert Hoover believed Japan might have negotiated as early as February. What is finally conceded after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, after Soviet entry, after the coup and the Midnight Conference and the emissaries and the ceremony on the Missouri, is what might have been offered in the spring, before any of it. History does not confirm what would have happened if it had been. The deadlock in Japan was real. The institutional forces resisting surrender were real. Whether modified terms would have broken them in time is a question the record cannot answer cleanly. Henry Stimson called what was chosen our least abhorrent choice. That phrase has lasted because it is honest about what it is not claiming. It is not claiming the choice was good. It is not claiming the alternatives were worse. It is claiming only that the men who made it, living inside the uncertainty of that summer, could not find anything they were willing to call better. 370,000 Purple Hearts, made in 1945, for men in an invasion that never came, and still being placed on the chests of soldiers wounded in wars whose names the men who manufactured them could not have imagined. Whether that stockpile is the legacy of the atomic bomb, or of the invasion it replaced, or of the war that made both of them necessary. That is a question history has been answering for 80 years, and has not finished answering yet.